Well, I'm in the middle of doing a one-take wonder here. We'll see how it goes. I've got to try to cover all this information in one take since I don't have any real editing skills, and I have no idea whether I can pull it off. So we're going to try. I'm working on this project that we'd covered in classroom, which is that self-portrait mixed media project. And as you can see, what I've done right here so far is that, I took a picture of me and then I drew the outline. And there's a lot of different ways you could approach this. Like right here, what I started with was just a pen and a pencil. And I have a bunch of printouts. And so I kind of cheated. You guys, if you have printers at home, printers are awesome for this because they allow you to do a bunch of stuff. You don't need them. Like I could go on and do a bunch of cool drawing stuff with this. Like I could put stuff in the background. I could add clouds or swirls, or I could add landscapes, or I could add designs or patterns or doodles, or I could write words, that would weave around my head in different ways. I could put a poem on there. There's all kinds of ways that I could totally do this self-portrait thing just with a pencil or just with a pen. But I wanted to give you some other ideas because if you have the access to glue and, a glue stick and some scissors and some tape and, markers or watercolors or any of that stuff, then it probably opens up a little bit for you. Although if you look at the examples that I showed you, many of the examples were actually just hand drawn. And then some of the other ones are more like what I'm kind of referring to as mixed materials. So let's just, start with the idea that you could take a picture of yourself on your phone. You wouldn't even have to print it out. You could just draw your own silhouette, based off of that, and then do drawings that represent all of those different identity markers that I talked about, like where do I like to go, what kinds of things do I like, what kinds of traits in people, am I interested in, so on and so forth. Okay, but let's just talk about the idea that, like, say you drew out your face, and then like even on this one here where we drew it out. And then I cut this shape out right here so that I had a shape that was, like me, right? Like, so I had a shape that was of my face. Now, it wouldn't necessarily be a print unless you had a print to do it from. Then all of a sudden you'd have that silhouette shape. You can trace that into, onto other things. You can move it around. You could do all sorts of stuff. You could also treat it as a negative. Like here, if I just put the back of it, if I draw that outline and then cut that piece of paper away and put it over the top of something else, then I create this other style effect here. You could start thinking about the fact that you could mix and move pieces inside of pieces and get some pretty varied looks pretty easily. So there's a lot of different ways that you can stack information. Now here, I'm just using a sheet of text, right? And so I could do that in with all kinds of stuff. Like, for instance, like, I'm gonna take this now. Excuse me, I dropped that. I'm gonna put this behind it now and say that I'd drawn out my figure, and then, I put an outline on a piece of paper so I could start finding stuff now. I found this old calendar book that had all these funky little pictures and stuff in it, but, magazines would do anything. You guys know how I'm always talking about, like, I wish I had hair to try all the cool different hairstyles that, that one could try. Like, I could give myself a really nice, that's pretty current, you got to admit. And, but I could also do other stuff with it. Like, what if I just take this piece here that I've cut out? Yeah, that's not going to be dark enough. you'd see that I would land myself a different style silhouette, and that was really fast. And you know, like if I spent a little bit more time, had some other colors, you start talking about being able to mix those, you know, with other things, and then all of a sudden your whole drawing or your whole, you know, presentation starts changing into pretty different ways to present self. So, you know, now I put it back in, and then it becomes a sort of movement piece. These are dumb examples, but it's going to be really boring for you for me to sit there and cut and paste a whole bunch of little things on top of each other. But once you have a basic outline, you can do all kinds of things to it. Like, you know, like even with this, if this was, you know, parts of my face, I could expose a whole nother shape into it just by opening it up, you know, just by changing it around. Then all of a sudden I become this sort of split personality, and there's a new area to work in here. So I could assemble the whole image with little collage stuff or drawings and collage combinations. I mean, I think the visual examples that I showed you have a ton of different ways that they went about approaching it. I put some watercolors here, and I also have some, you know, some markers and a bunch of different pens and stuff. You guys aren't necessarily going to have access to all this stuff. This is probably one of the last days that I'm going to get to work in the classroom for a little bit, because I've had to fill out a form every time I come up, and I think the building's going to get busier next week, and people are going to want to have lots of space in between people. So, but I thought I'd run in here and just, you know, at minimum, if you have a glue stick, to start assembling things, you know, to glue things on top of other things, and to you know, build your model for how you want to go about representing yourself. Then, you know, it could get pretty interesting for you, I think, pretty fast. And there's just, you know, like here, I have the advantage of having all of these, and I'm not saying I'm making something cool, but I have the advantage of having all these other images that I've printed out. And so some of you aren't going to have printers. You'll have to hand draw this stuff, you know, or hand cut it out. But I could just keep going and stacking, you know, a pretty cool, interesting retake or portrait of myself. The examples that I show you build layers on top of layers, and some of them were drawn from straight at the face, you know, where the face was forward, and other ones were drawn with these profiles or side views. I think the trick, and one of the things that I always talk to you a lot about in our classes, is that, you know, the more complex and interesting, the more complex and detailed it is, the more interesting it'll be. And so when you build these things, give yourself some real thought to, once you sort of get whatever kind of cool, interesting face you have with your identity pieces in it, then you can really think about the background and whether it needs to be plainer or graduated from light to dark, or one color, or filled with different things. So I'm going to take this thing now, and we'll see how this goes. It's hard to do a demonstration for me with the technology that I have, because I don't have a ton of editing knowledge and being able to kind of cut these videos into pieces and put them back together. So this is kind of a fast introduction, just to give you a sense of putting it together. The piece that's missing with what I'm doing right here is the ideas about what makes you, you know, more interesting as you. So finding imagery, whether it's like cool clothes or cool ideas, or, you know, like having math equations in your head, and sort, you know, like having the whole head area full of thoughts that you're having, or having the background be in interesting places that you would like to be, or putting those things inside your head. what happens if the images are inside the person's body outline, and what does it mean when they're outside? And does that mean inside are the more thoughts or body-oriented stuff, and the outside's the outside world, or can you play on that and change it around and do different representations? So it's a real short video. It's all practice. I'll get better at this. Thanks for your time. I hope you have a great night.